Hi, Mark Ravisky for Crestwood Christian Church. Thanks for joining me on this snow day today. Seems like about 38 states are having snow days, and so we're going to stay home. Well, all of you are. You can see I'm in my office, but my commute, hardly an excuse not to get here. So anyway, I made it and trudged through the snow, and glad to share this message with you today. Did want to let you know that we're going to pause the David sermon. We're going to push that off to next week and share that when we're back in person. Once again, Lord willing, and the snow don't rise. All the same, today I'm going to share with you a message about living a counter-cultural life. And what I really specifically want to talk about is activity does not equal productivity. Activity does not equal productivity. I want to take you back to Lawrence Richard Walters, who was born in April of 1949. He had always dreamed of flying. At the age of 13, he was on a visit to the Army-Navy surplus store. He saw several empty weather balloons hanging from the ceiling, and he thought that would be an interesting way to fly. But a more practical way was, of course, learn to fly an airplane, which is exactly what he wanted to do. When he came of age, he enlisted in the United States Air Force with the hope of learning to fly. However, he had found out during that process that he had poor eyesight, and it killed his flying career before it ever began. After leaving the Air Force, Walters decided to hatch a plan. He was going to get in the air one way or another. And so what he did was he grabbed some of those weather balloons he had seen in the Army surplus store. He filled them with helium and attached them to a lawn chair in his front lawn that was anchored with a chain. The idea was that he would float up a couple hundred feet above his yard. He would look around for a little while, and then he would make his way back down after that. A simple plan, but one he was really excited about. But while 33 years old, he didn't exactly get the math right on this project. Oh, he got some of it right. He spent $4,000 in the project, buying 4 dozen of those weather balloons, getting the helium necessary, getting a sturdy aluminum chair from Sears. He did all the things you would think you would need to do. He even prepared a cooler with some refreshments so he could have a snack while he hung around up there and enjoy his view. He even bought a parachute. I mean, that's pretty prepared. You bought yourself a parachute just to make sure. And he had a radio, a CB, and he bought a BB gun. The idea was he would pop one balloon at a time until he slowly began to descend. Where his calculations went wrong is how many weather balloons he thought it would take to lift him in the air. He had way too many. And by the time he cut off his first anchor, the second one, which was attached to the roof of his house, ripped off and he shot up into the sky about 16,000 feet. Now, I know this sounds like some crazy story made up for a point, but it's absolutely true, and if you search on YouTube, you can find a little bit of footage of when he broke away from the house. And so what he did after he got up there is he wanted to start popping some of his balloons to begin his descent. He eventually made his way down, and he was really near some power lines, and he caused a neighborhood blackout because of how some of the balloons fell into the lines. It was a real issue. Of course, he was immediately arrested, as you would anticipate. And when a reporter asked him, "Why'd you do it?" he said, "Well, a man just can't sit around." And I think, there's a lot of wisdom in those words, or at least truth, if not wisdom. A man just can't sit around. A woman just can't sit around. No one wants the sum of their total life to be 0. So we start doing things. We get active. We go places. We collect things. We learn a new hobby. We say yes to so many commitments because we want to have a meaningful life. We want to have a life that is defined by activity. But maybe in our pursuit of activity, we lose productivity, meaning, and purpose. Now, the Bible does warn us against being idle for sure. It's in Ephesians chapter 5 that says this, "Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is." However, we should not take that as free license to just run into any activity we can find without knowing where we're going or what we're going to accomplish when we get there. So many today are active. They're busy, but they're not going anywhere in particular. You might be active, but maybe you're not productive in the areas of your life that matter. Your relationship with God is suffering. Your relationship with people, maybe it's not as good as it could be. Your relationship with yourself, it's not a priority. The countercultural doesn't worry about what the world thinks, what people think. The countercultural lifestyle worries about what God thinks. And when we worry about what God thinks, that will impact our relationships. And it will impact our activity as well. We need to seek approval from God in our lives. Ecclesiastes 2:17 says, "So I hated life, because the work that is done under the sun was grievous to me. All of it is meaningless, a chasing after the wind." What we do with our time is what we do with our lives. There's no difference. How well you handle your time is what you're investing your life into. And if you waste your time, you could easily say you're wasting your life. Does that mean you can never have some downtime and scroll social media or watch some meaningless shorts or reels or Instagram? No, of course you can do those things. The question is, how much are you going to invest in those things? I mean, do you want a real test of what you're doing with your time? Well, keep a log, an honest log. Maybe you don't share it with anybody because you'd be too embarrassed. But the moment you open social media to the time you close it, how much time were you on it? The time you open your Bible to the time you close it, how much time did you spend in it? The time you went shopping, online or in person, to go find the perfect deal, how much time did you invest in that? Versus setting up the right conversation to have with a family member or friend or neighbor or church member or coworker to share something significant about your faith. If you kept an honest time log, I bet most of us would be really embarrassed about where our time is spent. Stuff gets put into our life, but nothing gets taken out. The important just get less room. This is a problem. Think about it. After high school, you go to college, you start working, you begin your career, you start a family, you go to church, you volunteer for something else, and you're overwhelmed by everything. And you're like, how am I going to get anything done? When is there going to be any time for me? And there's always the thought, pretty soon I'm going to start that spiritual journey. Pretty soon I'm going to focus on what's important. But then before you know it, you're at the end of your life wondering what just happened. Solomon's life was overflowing. He was the most powerful man in the world, in charge of the most powerful nation in the world at the time. He appointed judges. Military decisions that he made were absolute. He was the standard of everything. He was the wealthiest man who ever lived. Foreign dignitaries came to him for advice and for his wisdom. On top of that, he made it his personal desire to achieve every pleasure life had to offer. He married 1,000 wives. He tasted wine and all the extravagant things that the world had to offer in that realm. He went all around the world trying to experience what he could. And do you remember what he concluded at the end of his life? He said it's meaningless, like chasing after the wind. Nobody did as much activity as Solomon. But nobody felt more empty at the end of the day either. Now, some of you could say you live at that pace. You say yes to everyone. You're always going here. You're going there. You're doing this. You're doing that. And it might be well-meaning and it might be really good in the moment. You never say no. But at some point, you're going to have to take a pause and look at your life and say, what has my life been made up of? A foot on the gas pedal and nothing else. You know, we talk about mobile on the run and quick trip and fast stop. We're all about how quickly can we get going again. People are living hyperactive lives. Everything they do is in a rush. And when they have downtime, it's invested in the meaningless. When was the last time you had a conversation with someone face to face where a phone didn't go off and I got to check that message? When was the last time you were sitting in church and you didn't get a vibration tone? You're like, I wonder if that's important. Yeah, Amazon telling you there's another deal. Can't wait 30 minutes. When was the last time you went through a meaningful experience without something else trying to draw your attention away? Some people today wear busyness as a badge of honor. You think you're better than everyone. You think you're more important. Well, people can't do it without me. It's not a badge of honor to do that. It's a badge of misplaced priorities. We have to learn to slow down and get this right. And that's why the Bible makes it clear that God expected us to work hard, but he did also expect us to rest. Exodus chapter 20 puts it this way: remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your male or female servants, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but he rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Now, we're not under the Old Testament commandments in the same way that the Jews of the Old Testament were, but the principle is still valid. We need a change of pace in life. God designed us to live more efficiently when we learn to take breaks from our activity. With an overactive life, our bodies break down, our emotions and relationships suffer, and we miss God's opportunities for our lives. Remember the story of Mary and Martha? Martha busied herself presenting this large meal for Jesus and his followers, and she became angry that Mary was just sitting in the living room next to Jesus. And Martha orders Jesus around. Tell her to help me. Let me tell you something. When you start telling Jesus what to do, you've misplaced your priorities. Your schedule, your to-do list, it's out of whack. It's time to reset. And do you remember what Jesus said? He didn't go on a power trip. Oh, you're going to talk to the Son of God like that? God in the flesh? Really? Well, let's have a conversation, Martha. He said, Martha, Martha, you are worried about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Mary has chosen which is better, and it will not be taken from her. Martha thought activity was important, that serving a meal was important. Mary thought her relationship with the Lord was important. And Mary soaked up this opportunity to be with Jesus. Ultimately, Solomon concludes that there's 2 reasons why his active life was futile. Number 1, everything he worked for was temporary. Everything he worked for was temporary. Ecclesiastes 2:18, I hated all these things I had toiled for under the sun, because I must leave them to one who comes after me. That's the crazy thing. You work so hard in your life. You work hard so that down the road you can make life more comfortable. But then all of a sudden, you know a guy, he retires. And just the moment he's into retirement, he has a heart attack and dies. And everything he worked for is left to someone else. And you start to wonder, is that what I'm working for? For someone else's comfort? For someone else to get all my stuff? Or what if they don't want your stuff and it goes to Goodwill and Savers and the Salvation Army, and then eventually it gets thrown in the scrap heap because nobody wanted what you worked so hard to get? Or you work like crazy to provide for your family and you wonder, if you leave them an inheritance, can they handle it? Will there be family drama? Will a family be torn apart because they can't agree on how much stuff each one's supposed to get? That's happened more than once in history. Ecclesiastes chapter 2 says, So my heart began to despair over all my toilsome labor under the sun. For a person may labor with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then they must leave all their own to another who has not toiled for it. This too is meaningless and a great misfortune. You work hard, and you want to enjoy the fruit of your labor, to buy yourself a luxury item here or there. And then when you do, what happens? It breaks. It doesn't satisfy like you thought it would. It leaves you feeling empty. And Solomon knew that empty feeling. He felt terrible because everything he did work for was temporary. Well, maybe you feel dissatisfied with life because you're chasing the temporary stuff and the temporary pleasures. What you think will make you happy actually leaves you wanting more. Well, the second reality Solomon came into contact with was increased activity only resulted in increased stress. Increased activity only resulted in increased stress. Ecclesiastes 2, beginning in verse 22. What do people get for all their toil and anxious striving to which they labor under the sun. All their days their work is grief and pain. Even at night their minds do not rest. This too is meaningless. The more active you are, the more stressed you are, the more you work to accumulate, the more you worry about it. The thing you think that'll make you happy actually gives you more stress and burden. So what is Solomon's remedy? Where does he go from here? Ecclesiastes 2, beginning in verse 24. A person can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in their own toil. This too I see is from the hand of God, for without him who can eat or find enjoyment? Being active is not a sin, but it can lead to sin, or it can harm your relationship, your emotional health, your physical health, or your spiritual health. Solomon gives us some advice then on how we can be people while at the same time being productive people. Not just people who are active and busy, but people who are actually doing something meaningful with our lives. And the first step is this: be firm in your priorities. Be firm in your priorities. Solomon says, without God, who can find satisfaction and enjoyment? He goes on to say that the simple things like having a bite to eat, or having a drink, or working are useful when you're walking with God. Jesus said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and then all these things will be given to you as well. E.M. Gray studied successful people for years, and his conclusion was that the number one trait they all had is they put first things first. When you put God first, family second, work third, and hobbies fourth, you're doing good. But the problem is the immediate crowds out the important. Somehow a weekend away with a family seems more enticing than going to church with the family. Somehow staying at work to get a little bit more done seems more important than a dinner with the family. It's tough to keep priorities in line, but it's absolutely essential. You know, Nehemiah was called by God to rebuild Jerusalem's walls, and this ticked off some people. They were opponents of God. And so they tried to devise a plan to harm and kill Nehemiah. They said, hey, come on down here. We want to talk to you. And Nehemiah said, I'm doing a great work. I can't come down. Why should the work come to a standstill so I could see you? When you have your priorities in line, you're doing a great work. Don't forget what matters most. A second principle we learn is to say no to the secondary. Say no to the secondary. Sometimes saying yes to the secondary seems like a good thing in the moment. You're doing someone a favor. You're taking part in an activity you want to, but sometimes it'll distract you from the primary. Solomon was called to be the leader of the people of Israel. He didn't have time to go after all the pursuits of the world, but he really wanted to, and it cost him enjoying his life and being productive in the most godly way. We often need to say no to the things that would be more enjoyable. The number one enemy of your best life is usually the second best. In order to say yes to priorities, we have to say no to things that would be enjoyable. So what are we going to do? I want to read a poem to you. I've got it on my phone here. There's a phone, but I haven't had a notification yet. All right, I want to read it for you. It says, not all who wander are lost. A popular quote. Seems good in the moment, but leads to melancholy. Wander for a moment and find happiness. Wander too long and lose purpose. Wander for a day to see what happens. Wander for a year and wonder where it went. Wander for a week and be refreshed. Wander for a season and feel closer to the grave. Wander for a couple weeks and questions begin to build. Wander for a couple years and lose hope. Wander, but not too long. How important it is for us to never wander too long. Yes, getting away, unplugging, disconnecting, having a moment where you're just mindlessly doing something, great. But you do it too long, and life is going to slip away, and you're going to wonder where it went and what have I done with it. Jim Collins is a former professor from Stanford and author of the book Built to Last. And he once talked about his goal to read 100 books in a year. The first night, he sat in his chair with War and Peace, a massive book. And the TV remote was on the stand next to him, and he decided he was going to watch a little bit of Monday Night Football first, and then he would start reading. 2.5 hours later, he looked up and realized he hadn't read a single page, and he was never going to achieve his goal if something didn't change. So he called his brother-in-law and said, "Come take the TV out of my living room. It's free, and if I ever ask for it back, shoot me." Jim Collins then wrote this: "To accomplish your goals, what TV do you have to unplug in your life?" To accomplish your goals, what TV do you have to unplug in your life? We have to say yes to the priority and start to say no to the secondary. The third thing we have to do is realistically evaluate our efforts. When God created the world, after every day, he said this was good, and then he got to the point where it was very good when he created man. We need to do that. We need to have the right evaluation. So how's your life going? Is your family life good? Is your work life good? Is your spiritual life good? Is anything very good? Evaluate your priorities. See where your focus is. See what matters. Realistically evaluate, how am I doing? The fourth and final thing I want to share with you: carpe diem, seize the day. Do you want to live a life that is fully alive? Then you have to take hold of the day today. Ecclesiastes 3 said there's a time for every activity under the sun. Obviously, sin would not be qualified under everything, but there's a time to relax. There's a time for sports. There's a time for games. There's a time for puzzles and hobbies or whatever it is you like to do. A time for rest or just laying down and scrolling. It's fine. But it can't be the main goal of your life. It can't take up the bulk of your time. So many people sitting in church, even watching this video, you're distracted. Especially since you're sitting at home and not at church, you're more likely to look at your phone a little bit longer or talk to the person next to you without staying focused. You're more likely to be distracted, and you're going to be able to say, well, at least I listened to it. Kind of. Really? Is that what a seize the day life looks like? A life fully alive is not a life that is divided and split up. It is one that is intently focused on what matters. Psalm 118:22 says, "This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it." One of the things I try to do in my life is when I'm somewhere, I try to be completely focused where I am. So when my family goes on vacation, I don't think about work. And when I'm at work, I don't just daydream about being on vacation. Oh, the thought comes once in a while, I have to admit. But I try not to make that the number one focus. Wherever I am, I need to be present. And that's what a life fully alive is all about. Let's go back to Larry Walters. Flew in that lawn chair, strapped with weather balloons in 1982. In September of 1982, he told a reporter of the United Press that he vowed never to do it again. But a San Diego businessman offered him a substantial sum of money if he would give it a try, and nothing came of it, though. In 1992, Timex recognized Larry Walter in an advertisement based on adventurous individuals. So did Larry Walters. What came of his desire to pursue something? Remember what he said? A man just can't sit around. Well, it seems like he never found that happiness he was looking for. Later in his life, Walters hiked the San Gabriel Mountains and he did volunteer work for the United States Forest Service. But on October 6th of 1993, at the age of 44, he hiked to his favorite spot in the Angeles National Forest, and he shot himself in the heart. He left no suicide note. A man just can't sit around? While that's true, a man just can't run around either. He has to live for something meaningful. He has to live life on purpose. He has to be fully alive. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. Let us be fully alive in it. Is your life a little bit of a letdown right now? Is it not accomplishing exactly what you thought or hoped it would? Maybe we would do well to learn from Solomon, the wisest fool who ever lived, when he wrote Ecclesiastes 3:11 that said God has made everything beautiful in his time. He's also set eternity in the human heart. Jesus said, don't work for food that spoils, but for food that endures forever, to eternal life. If you're ready to reap something eternal, if you're ready to receive something eternal, what are you waiting for? Don't delay a life that's fully alive till tomorrow, till after the snowstorm's over, till we get back to routine. It's too late. Choose this day whom you will serve. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Be fully alive. Be intentional. Make some memories this snow day, and see God's goodness wherever you go. Thanks for joining me on this cold, snowy day. I hope you were encouraged, and if so, take time to share it with a friend. Have a great day. God bless.